Alright, hello again. Why Myoan players play out of tune, part 2. If you're used to the modern interpretation of Shakuhachi music and Japanese music in general, especially from the Edo era, you're probably used to the Miyakobushi scale. That's the one you hear here. Oops, I don't play that too often. Right, and it's that scale that goes. This was very popular during the Edo era, when Shakuhachi, Fuke Shakuhachi was kind of at its peak. So it's no surprise that it may have influenced their playing it a little bit, and I'm sure it probably did. At the same time, you have to also remember that this is religious music, so, you know, in a sense, it was in a vacuum. It was a little bit apart and separate, playing to a different tune, if you will, than the popular music of its time. So, why is that? Old style Myoan playing tends to be without those deep meri notes that you hear in the Miyakobushi scale. I'll play Choshi for you. So did you hear those tsu meri and the chi meri? They're not very meri. Not as much as in modern shakuhachi anyway. So why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them, like I kind of told you about a little bit before, is simply the way we play, right? You play open hold, and that kind of helps the breath flow through the shakuhachi more freely, and it feels better in your body. You're also paying more attention to tone color than you are to pitch. So that's a way to engage with the tones in a way that's kind of not critical, right? Instead of saying like, oh, I should do this, oh, I should do this. You're just observing like, oh, this is like this, okay. It also depends on your flute. Some Myoan players, of course, do play those deep meris at times. I find that more often than not, it's when they're playing for other people or making a recording. However, for example, on this flute, I made this one so that it can do those very meri notes. So I found that sometimes when I play for other people, or even when I play for myself, I am in the mood to play that way. So sometimes I do, because I like. Right, so I can play old style with the holes open, but I can get those deep meris very easily with this flute. So when I'm in the mood to do that, I do. Uh, but somehow I kind of like the other way a little bit better. Now this flute too, this will do that. If you play just about any old style flute at the top of its range, the way that it's constructed gives it actually quite a bit of meri-kari range. It's not the word I'm looking for, but it does the trick. Right? So yeah, you can do that. But the thing is, playing the other way is I kind of like it better for everyday playing, and it's a little bit more comfortable as well. One aspect that you can consider is that the meri that we play, or basically the tsu that we play in Myoan, it's kind of right in the middle. And this is it's not just one pitch, it's a movable thing. It changes depending on what you're playing. Right? If you're moving up in the piece, lots of times it ends up being played a little bit higher. Right? But if you're moving down, it'll be played a little bit lower. Right? So there you go. If you're playing right in the middle, you can kind of comfortably move up or down as you please. Also, in terms of the flute, the higher chi, especially in the con register, is a little bit harder to meri. Right? You can, but it's not as comfortable. And also, there are some other effects like that we can kind of consider. Right? The lighter meri also has a feel that's different. The low meri has a feel that's very kind of solemn, soul-searching, all the things that we would expect from Shakuhachi, right? However, in everyday playing, you usually aren't at the extremes of your emotions. We reach the extremes from time to time, but not every day. That's too extreme. To me, my playing is kind of an everyday practice of God's presence. And as far as every day is concerned, it's kind of steady, right? The days are steady. There's a lot happening. There's certainly a lot happening here and there that is extreme. But every day is every day. That's my everyday. It's kind of easy going, don't you think? If your everyday is... Yeah, sometimes my life is like that, but not every day. It's me sitting outside on my porch while kids are coming home from elementary school, looking at the funny guy, you know? It's a very normal sound, and it's got a lot of depth to it. It takes some getting used to if it's not what you're expecting, but I think it's very rewarding. It that's how I like to play when I'm not playing for anyone. However, if we're looking at the Miyakobushi scale, we could say, like, oh, but it's wrong. It's not meri enough. Well, that depends on a couple things. Let's think about it from a musical perspective, right? We're used to auto-tuned computer processed music that's perfect. You listen to somebody who you've heard on a CD, you go to their concert, and they're like, it's like rain. You're like, what? Wow. Like, she actually sucks. Or he actually sucks. Or like, this guy's out of tune. Um, because people don't sing like computers, right? Uh, so who knows what people's musical sense was 100, 200 years ago. My guess, though, is in the 1500s, when different people were coming into Japan, I've read comments by Dutch traders, and some of them heard Japanese music and were like, cacophonous, it's horrible. Um, Other people, some of the Portuguese missionaries that first came, the Catholic missionaries came, and they're like, wow, it's kind of like mysterious and beautiful, right? Because it wasn't what they were used to hearing. Um, the sense of what is in tune is probably a bit fatter and thicker than they were used to, right? What does that mean? For example, something that I heard at a music therapy conference when I was talking to a musical psychologist guy. He's a really neat guy. And we were talking about this subject, and he said that lots of times in older style Japanese music, if you're playing, for example, sankyoku with shamisen and shakuhachi, for example, and sometimes you get into these motifs where they're both playing the same thing at the same time. One instrument would often play purposely a bit lower than the other to fatten the sound and emphasize their own tone color, right? To some people, that'll sound out of tune. To other people, with kind of a broader range of tone sense, if you want, it'll sound like kind of thick and fat, right? That's what it sounds like when Myoan players play together as well. It's like a flock of birds taking off. It doesn't always happen in an instant, like they're on the ground, they're in the air. Now it's a couple come out, then a bunch come up, and there's a couple stragglers, right? They're together, but not in unison necessarily, but still together. And people have got even if it's all 1.8, some are fat, some are thin. The tones are a little bit different. Their styles of playing are a little bit different, so it's together, but it's also different at the same time. And the result is this kind of very thick, fat sound, right? Um, and if that's the perspective that we're taking, then especially for these meri notes, all that we know is that they're supposed to be meri, right? That range of what is heard as a meri note, I think is pretty broad. It certainly is for me. So, Tsumeri. Yeah, there's quite a range of what sounds good and what feels good, to me anyway. And my sense is that maybe players in the previous century even probably had a sense of it that was a little bit closer to that. So again, even in the Miyakobushi scale, this isn't my field of specialty, but yeah, there might have been some of that flexibility even in the musical world as well as the kind of Fuke Shakuhachi world. I can't say anything like that for certain though. One thing I can say though that's interesting, right? If you think that Myoan Shakuhachi is not meri enough, listen to hitoyogiri music. This is what was happening in the 1400s, the 1500s, and into the 1600s when Shakuhachi was just, when Fuke Shakuhachi was just getting going and getting more popular. This was in its prime and fading out, decreasing that it may increase. It's like John the Baptist and Jesus, right? I must decrease that he may increase. So John the Baptist here was playing like, right? And had this kind of mode that comes from gagaku. It's gagaku. It's the Ritsu and Ryo scales, which are basically like this. And the scales are transposed around the flute through different seasons, but the ground mode, literally the ground mode, it's called doyo, which means like ground and earth. The ground mode for the flute is like this. Compare that to how we usually play Fuke Shakuhachi. The only anomaly that you have there is the chi, right? When you meri that, you do meri it a bit. You've got the meri sound, which is certainly meri, right? Right? That's certainly there. Was that there in the Ritsu scale? I don't know. I really don't know, but there is this note called ru. Whose pitch is a little bit unclear in the hitoyogiri world. So could it have been a little bit meri in the same way? Right? It's sometimes used like this. So it's not meri in some cases, but it may have been meri in other cases. And again, how meri, I don't know. Sometimes it's used in kind of like the way that utsu is used in the shakuhachi. It's a very meri in the pitch of re, and this is used in the same way sometimes. But again, was that kind of given this sort of fat feeling, so it ended up being exactly the same as the shakuhachi scale that we know now? I'm blurry. No, I'm not. Maybe. It's interesting to think about. It surely is an interesting coincidence to think about that the hitoyogiri scale that many samurai were using made it onto the Fuke Shakuhachi that many samurai were using among other people. So that's something to consider too. Maybe it's the Miyakobushi people that are playing too meri rather than the Fuke people who are playing not meri enough. Or maybe they're both fine, which is kind of where I am. Let's just play something at the end for fun. That was just the beginning of Akita Sugagaki. I'll play the rest when you're not listening. Have a good day.